firstly to introduce Niles. He's the Manager of Public Access at the Queensland State Archives. He's been in his current role for nearly 10 years and has in excess of 25 years' experience working with Queensland's documentary heritage. He began as a cataloguer at State Library and has worked with various collections in John Oxley, including oral history, photograph and manuscript collections. At the Queensland State Archives, Niles has focused much attention to enhancing resource discovery, that is, finding things for public records held in archives through a better indexing system, and is involved in developing a program of online service improvements to assist in the delivery of content to researchers. He enjoys telling people about the wonderful collections of Queensland State Archives, which is the custodian of the state's largest and most significant collection of government records, and is an invaluable research facility for those researching their family tree or local history. Niles will start today's session.
Thank you, Stephanie. As Stephanie said, it's always good to actually come out and tell people about the wonderful things that we have at the Queensland State Archives. And yes, we do have very much the largest collection because we have something like 48 kilometres worth of records, if you can get your head around just how much that is. So my job this morning is to tell you a little about the records that we have at the archives that relates to shipping and immigration that's held by the Queensland Government. Of course, the Queensland State Archives is out at Compton Road, and I trust most of you have been out there at some point. Yes? Good. Great to see. And our web address, of course, is www.archives.qld.gov.au. And because we're focusing much of our attention at putting content onto the website and directing resources so that people can have access to those records, the website, of course, is the first place that we direct people, the first port of call for most people when they're doing research. So one of the things that you'll see on the website is that up here we have the catalogue link. So if you're looking to do a search of the records, that's the first place you start. Down on the right-hand side, you've also got things like indexes, and I'll talk a little bit more about indexes as we proceed this morning. The Queensland State Archives, of course, holds the records of the Queensland Government, and that's both the government as it stands, the state government, but it's also local government authorities as well, and all the statutory authorities, the court system, and all those hanger-oners that are part of the state government. The records, of course, date back to the 1859 because, of course, that's when we separated from New South Wales. And we only have the records that are kept permanently by government. So not everything is kept at the archives. Only something like 10% of records created by government ever turns up at the archives. You could imagine just how much we would have if we collected absolutely everything. So what we'll do this morning is look a little bit at the records and the information that's available, but we'll also look at how you find those records and show you some of the pathways into doing that research. Immigration. We have the records of people coming into Queensland through the government immigration programs, and it's usually the assisted immigration programs. It dates back to 1849, so it's actually pre-separation from New South Wales. And the bulk of it, of course, is the records of people that come from the European countries. Places like New Zealand, America, unfortunately, if you're looking for those sorts of people, generally we don't have the records. The ports, of course, in Queensland is the crucial place for people to find the information. And that information is listed on the passenger list, so you know which port people actually came off. The details, of course, across the information that we have varies according to the record that you're looking at. The earlier records are very much details of who, what, when, where. The details later on give you more information about who the person was, where they came from. Sometimes you'll find records of their medical wellness and their family connections and things like that. So just because you find one set of records for one group of immigrants at one time doesn't mean to say you will find those same records for another group of immigrants that came in at another point in time. So the research tools that we have, pretty much the first place we refer people to is the online indexes. They're the easiest probably to search. You can simply put a name in and see what record comes up with that name attached. We do have some card indexes also in the public search room at the archives, and they're some of the things that we're working at transferring across into the online environment so that everybody can have access to those. We have a number of brief guides and search procedures as well, and this gives you information about the sorts of records that you will find when you are actually researching a topic. I actually have a set of brief guides for the immigration arriving this morning, and hopefully they will actually be out on the table at about 10:30, so you'll be able to pick those up on your way out this morning. All the brief guides and search procedures are online as well, so you can go to the website and find those and read it at your own leisure. And for those people, of course, that might be travelling or you don't have the whole day to spend at the archives, if you do some of that preliminary reading before you come to the archives, you don't need to spend so much time there, and you can utilise your time much better. And of course, the website with the catalogue is the other major place to go. You can do those searches, identify what you're wanting prior to coming to the archives, and you're all organised, and we can get them out for you when you actually come out to the archives. Now, I suppose just taking a step back, who do we consider is an immigrant? This is a definition that we've pulled out of one of our the acts that relates to immigration into Queensland, and it really just determines who that person or who these categories of people might be. But you can see that an immigrant may well be a free assisted, they could be nominated, which means they've got somebody in Queensland that they're coming out to either work for or they're sponsoring them. They could be indentured to a company or they've come out as free passengers. So again, depending on the sort of person that you have, you may have a different class of record to actually find the different people. The Immigration Acts are, I suppose, the source document that our records go back to. If you're wanting to find information about the program under which people came to Queensland, the Immigration Act is the place to go, because it will tell you who they were aiming at getting into Australia at that time period. It'll tell you the types of employment that the government was aiming to address in Australia, and it will also tell you the conditions under which they came to Australia. And in certain periods of time, it will actually tell you the sorts of baggage, I suppose, that people can bring with them on the ship. And there's one wonderful reference we found one day where it actually had a big note: you're not allowed to bring your feather beds. And we always thought that was really wonderful, that people might actually want to bring their feather beds out to Queensland with them. So it's always interesting to go back and have a look at the Immigration Act, because that will give you a lot of background to what was going on in the immigration schemes at the time. Just as an example of some of the early immigration records, they're usually nice registers. So we have a beautiful register that you can just flip through to find the passengers. With this one, you can see here the ship is called the Cloncurry. It came out from Glasgow, departing in 1884, and arrived in Brisbane in January 1885. You can then see the ports at which the passengers disembarked. So you've got the name of the port, and then you've got the passengers that are listed under that. And then you've got the different classes also of the passengers. So you can follow those through and find the immigrant that you'd be looking for. Now, just to go back, I suppose, to when you start research, we always start our research usually with some sort of question. Something has prompted us to go and find some information. So one of the things that we're going to try and do today for you is show you records that the three organisations have around one particular family that has come to Queensland. And we identified this family by the name of Goulding. We know they came to Queensland, and we believe that's in the late 1920s. And of course, whenever you're doing research, you need to question the basis under which you go off and look for information. You know, if Grandma said that great-grandma came out in the 1920s, yep, that's a good place to start. But in reality, they might have been here, you know, in the early 1930s even. Or they made plans to do something else in that time period, but they didn't come to much later. So always question the supposition under which you start your research, because if you don't, you may well miss the records that are going to be crucial for doing that research and find the information that's going to fill out that whole picture for you. We also know in this story that Gander plays a part. So it's another clue when you're looking for records that you've got some places that you can cross-check and double-check the information to see what's available. So as I said before, we start off our search by going to the Queensland State Archives website. Now, you've seen this page before, and I hope you're all learning the web address, because when you leave today, you all need to know that web address. And it's as I said, it's the place you always start. With doing the search, the indexes down here on the front page is the first place to begin. We actually have a lot of indexes available for people, and it's not just immigration that it covers. You can see there are a range of different topics, but if you're particularly looking for immigration, you can hit on the immigration link, and that will take you to the list of immigration records. Because we know that the Goulding family came out in the 1920s, we can pick out the particular immigration series that may well cover that time period. But as you can see, there are other immigration records for the period prior to that, and there's other immigration passport type records for the period after that. So it might well be worth checking the befores and afters, depending on what you find. The index on the website is simply a PDF, so you can just scroll through looking alphabetically for the surname. One of the things I know that Stephanie is going to tell you about later is about spellings of names, and I'm sure you're all more than aware of the variations in which names can be spelt. The records at the archives are no different, so always check the variations if the name the name you're looking for isn't actually the one you're finding. So with this one, we've actually found the information of the arrival. We've got an age. You can see there Jessie Goulding is the first one on the list. She was 21. She came on the Asova, and she arrived in January 1930. We also then have the immigration register listed. So if you want to come out to the archives, you can flip your way through that register, or you could write to us and we will extract the page and send it to you. And all that sort of thing. But it's always interesting to go and have a look through the register because you don't know what else you might find. The record that this refers to is this dossier, which gives information about the passengers that arrived on that particular ship. Jessie Goulding is the one right down the bottom. You can see there that the information that's on that list is basically what's been transcribed into the index. But you never know what else you might find when you actually go to the documents themselves. There's columns here that give information about religion and birthplace and all sorts of things like that. So we don't reflect all that information in the index. As I said, it's only an index. What we do know is that down here she is an assistant nurse. So we've got a little bit more of the story about Jessie. Now, one of the other things to do is to go and check the archives catalogue to see what else might come up under that surname. So go in and search the catalogue. It's a case of simply putting the surname into the search for box and see what comes up. And here we've actually got 24 items as a result from just putting that surname Goulding in. And there's the list of records that have come up. There's a number of different immigration type records, but there are other records that come up as well. So if you don't look at those, you might not get the full picture of what happened to the family maybe later or earlier. So just looking at some of these immigration files down the bottom, these are the sorts of files that you might well find will have the information for this time period in. So there are dossiers of the passengers and information about people who were planning on coming to Queensland. So some of these we'll have indexed, and then you can get straight to the information that you're looking for. In these files, you will find a whole range of records, and this type of record contrasts quite starkly to that passenger list for the Cloncurry that I showed you earlier. We actually have a dossier of files on this person. So there are different forms that they filled out at the time they were immigrating to Queensland, and it gives information about who they are, where they came from, what their family connections were. We've got their age, date of birth, where they came from. We've got whether she's single, her height, weight, and religion. So again, we're adding to more and more information to the story that we know of Jessie Goulding. On the back side of that form, we have more information as well. We've got information about her being a hospital nurse. We've got information here from the matron as well, who said that she served for 4.5 months at the hospital. She's interested in being possibly a domestic type person when she comes to Queensland. And we know here that she has a brother. So this is where Gayndah turns up. He's actually living in Gayndah. Now, he's only 15.5 years old, so he's actually quite a young fellow. Also on that file, we have, I suppose, a testimony as to her character, and there's a lovely bit of information about her being trustworthy, thrifty. She's a willing worker, bright, happy, healthy young woman. So we get all that sort of background information. We also know that she's been at home looking after her mother. Her mother's illness has prevented her from maybe working, and now that that illness has come to an end, she's able to move off to, I guess, greener pastures and leave home. In the file too, we find a medical examination certificate for her, which gives some information about her medical status. Here we have that her heart is normal, lungs are normal, physique is good. I think it says there that, is that big? I'm not quite sure. It says that she's got average intelligence. Almost 6 feet, so she was quite tall. Yeah. But, you always have to take some of these comments with a grain of salt because you're never quite sure who they're comparing to. And, of course, it's one person's opinion as well. We also have the notice of booking for her trip to Australia. So we've got information here about the ship, the fee that she will have paid, the information about the Commonwealth paying money for her to come, and what the total is. And the other wonderful thing you find in this particular series is a photograph. I suppose I shouldn't say that you will find this for all the passengers. You won't necessarily, but it's a real coup when you do find a photograph. Sometimes you'll find a family group shot. It could be a husband and wife, depending on who was actually coming out to Australia. So that's I think, probably one of the best things to find when you're going through those files. There's information also from the immigration agent at this end once she landed in Australia. And there's information there that's linking her to her brother, who's already, he's in Australia already. He's come over and he's working as a farm lad. So we've got information here about him and his wages, because he would have came under some sort of a system where the employer was sponsoring. So there's a number of letters in his file around where the payments are going from his wages. And eventually there's a letter that basically says that it's all sorted out now, he has his own bank account and he's right to go. So at some stage you might like to read all those letters, and especially if you find letters like that for someone that you've got, it paints a whole story around the background for that person. We also did a search, and this is one of the sources that you won't find by simply putting a name search into either our indexes or our catalogue. These are the school admission registers, and depending on where you know that people are, you might be able to check the school admission register to find if maybe they stayed in that area. And this is 1954, so this is some years later, and we find that there's some Gouldings being registered at the local school so that we know that the family is still in the area. And William Goulding here is a farmer, and he's got 2 children, one 6 and one 9. So there's a bit more of that whole story that you can pad out depending on what you're looking for. Now, just I suppose to fill in some of the blanks, the records that we have at the archives range according to who created those records. And it's not always a simple process to go to one series of records and find them because they've been created by different agencies. And so this is a list of the different agencies covering the different date periods. And if you look through those dates, you'll find that they pretty much flow on one to the next all the way down until we have the current department that is authorised to look after the immigration records that we have. So there may well be other series of records that are related to the ones we've already looked at. In the early years, the Colonial Secretary's records has correspondence about immigrants coming into Queensland. So that's another place to look. Things like the Inspector of Pacific Islands, if you have Pacific Islanders you might be chasing, there's a whole series of records there that relate specifically to that group of people. So there's a whole gamut of different areas that you might need to check when you're looking for passengers or people coming into Queensland. One of the things that you will find also in some of the earlier passenger information is the health officers' reports for the vessels coming into Queensland. This will paint a good picture of what the voyage, I suppose, to Queensland was like. You'll find information in the newspapers sometimes about vessels being quarantined, and some of the health officers' report will give you some background into those. So they're always an interesting read. One of the things I should highlight is that access to some of the immigration records is not necessarily open, depending on the age of those records. Some of those records may have a 65-year closure on them, and that's because the more recent records have got personal information, as you've seen already, and of course a lot of the family members may still be alive, and the department doesn't like to give those records out. There is a process by which you can apply to have access to those records, but you need to talk to the reference archivists and they will give you the contacts, because you can go back to the Department of Multicultural Affairs and ask for access to a particular file if it is still closed. If you're wanting to search all our indexes all at once, you can do that. From the list that you've seen, there's quite a number of different indexes. And so if you have to go through looking for the family members in each of them, it's fairly labour intensive. Using the search box up on the top right-hand side of your screen, you can put the surname in and it will search everything that's on our website and bring you up with all the references that turn up both on the website but also in the indexes. So it covers everything. So it's a nice quick way of pulling all those records together. There are various reasons as to why you may not find a passenger, and I'm sure you've had discussions already, and especially those that might belong to family history groups. There'll be various reasons as to why people don't turn up on registers. There's just a few of them that we've noted, and I suppose when anybody's doing research, there are always things to keep in mind when you're chasing for people. This is just a photograph we found, of course, relating to young Master Goulding coming out to Queensland as a farm lad. The Salvation Army actually had a program for bringing farmlands out to Queensland. Now, he may well be in that photograph, but unfortunately we don't have a list of names. So, if anybody knows him and can pick him out, we'd love to know who he is. Or any of them, that's exactly right. There's a whole heap of them there. Now, I guess just a little promo, if people want to keep in touch with what we're doing at the archives and what our new indexes are, you're welcome to sign on to our QSA bulletin. It's a monthly electronic bulletin that goes out to your email. So you can just sign up and we can send that out to you. It's a little bit of a read about what we're doing, where we are, and the new indexes and new records, which often you don't just pick up because it's hard to keep up with what's happening.